Good morning, everybody. Today is July 26, 2021, third week of our class, BMN 513, Buddhism through its scriptures. I hope everyone is doing great. I received some of your responses for the first week and the second week homework assignments. Looks good. Still, I do not know how many of you are in the class, but that doesn't matter. We were discussing at the very beginning about the scriptures, and then last week we were discussing about the three jewels. This week I thought we should delve into the idea of scriptures again, because it's very important. When you, I remember at the very outset, in the very first lecture, the introduction, I gave you the idea that scriptures are like sacred writings. So, for instance, I told you in Christianity, the Holy Bible is a scripture. When you use the word holy, it does have the meaning of sacredness. And then in Islam, we find Holy Quran, same concept, holy scripture. So they are like a single book. But when you come to Buddhism, it is not the case like that. It's totally different. Buddhist scriptures are very, very big, vast volumes of books in different countries. So it's totally different setting. Some of you have already taken my classes, and we've been discussing about the formation of what you may call the canon. We use a word in Buddhism, canon. Canon means Pitaka. The Pali word is Pitaka, basket. So we find, if you go back to the Buddha's lifetime in the 6th century BCE in India, a very interesting thing is Buddha did not write a single word. Very important. He did not write. Instead, what he did was he had free discussions, free dialogue with his disciples, and whoever who happened to meet him. He had sometimes communications, conversations, dialogues, and sometimes as a teacher, he gave certain instructions, those things. So these things at the very beginning, they were not considered as scriptures or canon, not the Tripitaka or something. But what happened was, after he passed away, the monks, the leading monks, disciples of the Buddha, they thought that they should have some sort of preservation, to preserve what Buddha said. What the Buddha said, they thought they should preserve it for their own benefits, as well as for the benefits of the many who are yet to come. So in this sense, Buddhist texts were in memory at the beginning. Everything uttered by the Buddha uttered by the master, uttered by the teacher, they all were in memory. A lot of monks were really, really capable of memorizing things, and they kept those texts. Even though they are not written, they are called texts. In certain given, in any given occasion, the Buddha talked about on a certain topic or certain question or something, and that became a text. So about 400 years, it's such a big time, nothing was written down. At least 400 years after the Buddha's passing, nothing was written. Everything was in memory. So their minds were working properly. Memory was working properly. In fact, in Buddhism, there's a word called mindfulness. You must have heard this thing. In other words, satipatthana in Pali. That means maintaining mindfulness. Mindful means alert. It has the connotation of memory too. So mindfulness goes with memory. So memory has a very, very big role to play in Buddhism. You have to be really, really aware of what is happening in you and around you. To be mindful, you have to have a certain amount of memory. So in Buddhism, memory is highly regarded as a good quality. So that's not the idea that I want to tell you, but from the very beginning of Buddhism, memorization, committing to memory was very important. But today it's totally different. Nobody memorizes anything, just take pictures. Even a name card is given to you, you don't keep it, you just take a picture and save it. Digitalized age. So it's totally different. In a way, you might argue that why we should memorize things, why we should worried about keeping things in memory, since we have all digital equipment, phone, whatever the other saving places. So your memory doesn't have to play a big role nowadays. Only the electronic devices will do everything. We are just pressing the button or things like that. But those days, that means about 25 centuries ago, that was not the case. So everything was in memory. So in earliest Buddhist scriptures, this is the point that I want to make. Earliest Buddhist scriptures were not written down things. They were not written down. They were in memory. So scriptures in Buddhism, scriptures formed, took its shape in human brain, human mind, in memory. So, so any monk is a repository, a place where a lot of texts were stored, hard drives. Memory played very big role. And then the scriptures, so to speak, in Buddhism was started around 1st century BCE. 1st century BCE, that means about at least 400 years later, the passing of the Buddha. And that was not in India. That took place in Sri Lanka, where the big problem arose in Sri Lanka at that time was a famine. no food, nothing to drink, 13 years long famine. At that point, the monks were dying one after the other. Those who were, keeping the Tripitaka in memory, they were dying. They were in a struggle to save their lives. So now you can understand the problem. If someone dies who has the memory of a certain text, and then that text will itself die at the danger of disappearance. So at that point, the monks decided, now anymore, we cannot keep this thing going on. What is this thing? Keeping things in memory. So what we need to do is now take a bold decision to write them down. Let us commit these texts, these scriptures into writing so that it will remain. It will be long lasting. That's how things were started at the beginning. So texts were written down. Give me 1 second. Okay. Texts were written down in Sri Lanka. That is called the committing to the writing. Pali Tripitaka to begin with. First, they were written in, ola leaf. There's a particular way of preparing ola leaf, palm leaves. On palm leaves, they used specific ink that they made, and texts were written down, and then the whole text was made a book. So that way, they preserved the teaching for some time. So that is how the scriptures or Buddhist text physically came into being. Otherwise, the texts were not in physical form at the beginning. About 400 years of long history. Texts were not in physical format, but in memory. So memory turned into text, and they became scriptures. So you have to pay attention to the formation of the canon in Buddhism. I have talked on this topic several times in several classes. Text, what do you call the Pali Tripitaka? Pali Tripitaka, the 3 baskets, Vinaya, Abhidharma, and Sutra. Buddhist teachings, Buddhist discipline, and the extra teachings, Abhidhamma. So these 3 canons, Pitakas, were originally formed after the passing of the Buddha. Still today, you find it everywhere in the world, preserved in good condition. And very interesting thing is, Buddhism gives a lot of place to study. Studying text, studying scriptures. Monastic life, monk's life is totally dedicated for that thing. Monks usually study the text, memorizes the text, and then preserves it, puts into practice. So in that sense, Buddhism gives a lot of effort, a lot of weight to study. when they study things, it is easier for you to memorize things when you organize it in such a way that you can keep that in memory. So that's why in Buddhism, you find a lot of lists, 10 of this, 5 of that, 12 of this, like that. They are organized in a systematic way so that they can be memorized. Even in today's classes, when we study things, we memorize, we put them into categories and memorize them. So Buddhism, you find that aspect. And the other important thing in this today's class, we have to pay attention to the formation of the Pali Canon. Pali Canon is not just overnight production. It took shape in many different centuries and finally came into popularity or existence. In the first century CE, it became a closed canon. Canon was closed. After that, no more editions. That's it. That I'm talking about the Pali Canon. And there are some other canons too. If you study Buddhism in Chinese, then you have what you may call the Chinese canon. A very big collection of texts, scriptures, huge collection in Chinese. And in some of you have experience in Tibetan Buddhism too. In Tibetan Buddhism also you find a vast collection of Buddhist texts spanning from maybe about 1,000 years of collection. It's called Tanjur, and also it has the what you may call the commentaries, Tanjur and Kanjur, two sections. In Pali Canon also you find original canon, and then later commentaries were added, because to understand certain things you need the commentary. So commentaries were commentaries were written again in Sri Lanka, and that's also a very huge collection. So in this way, we find in Buddhism, the scriptures are pretty big, volumes of books. So then the important thing is, when there are volumes of books ranging from like thousands of years, ideas are different. At the very beginning, if you say about rebirth, let's take the concept of rebirth, reincarnation or rebirth. That particular idea will evolve. It would evolve into, not the original idea, but as time goes by, it evolves. So you find a little bit of evolution in the same principle in the texts. So that what I'm trying to say is that the beginning of the texts and the development, when it developed into big collections, the idea development, you see a certain changes. So that aspect you can see in Buddhist scriptures. In fact, in our class, we are looking certain developments of the concepts. So pay attention to the canons, Pali canon, Chinese canon, Tibetan canon, like that. Same text, they have been translated into different languages, and also some new additions. And that's compared to Theravada Buddhism, and as well as Mahayana. Mahayana Buddhism, they started their project by writing. They just started with writing. Theravada Buddhism, they kept certain things in memory, but Mahayana Buddhism, at the very outset, they started writing. You know, the very interesting thing in history, in the world history, not just Buddhist history, world history, earliest extant book writing in physical format, you know where it was found? It was found in China in 9th century, I think. It belongs to the 9th century, 845, as far as I remember. And that was a Buddhist sutra, Diamond Sutra. You have heard the name perhaps. Diamond Sutra is the earliest extant text in the world in written format. That is the earliest book found in the world. So that's a scripture, right? So in this way, in Buddhism, you find a lot of text as scriptures. But the beginning of these texts were during the beginning of these texts happened during the time of the Buddha. And as time went by, it evolved into many different areas and different additions were made. That way, it became a huge collection of scriptures and texts. So in the class, today's class, you have to do a little research on the development and the formation and the development of the Pali canon and the other canons in Buddhism. So scriptures, their evolution of Buddhist scriptures, a survey, you have to do that. And I hope that is enough for today. So pay attention to that aspect, evolution of Buddhist scriptures. And if you have any question, please, as usual, email me or call me, and you will get the homework assignment in the email. That's it for today. Thank you very much.